The current African Cup of Nations, as weird and terribly organized as it is a good cause to talk about a very interesting topic. For a man of my age, it seems like it was yesterday, but obviously it's a false feeling, because in reality 25 years have passed. It may look pretty odd for the very young viewers, but in the middle of 1990s there was a strong theory that Africa will inevitably rule the world of football in the near future, and watching how fast the black continent was progressing on every imaginable level back at the time, this idea didn't seem implausible or far-fetched. Cameroon's impressive performance at the 1990 World Cup became the trigger, and in the next few seasons the best African players suddenly turned into a real hot property. Abedi Pele and Yafet Ndoram were among the perennial protagonists in France. Anthony Yeboah and a little bit later JJ Okocha deserved a star status in Germany. Daniel Amokachi made an impact in Belgium before going to England. Emmanuel Amunike conquered Portugal in the football sense of this word, and Finidi George, along with Nwankwo Kanu, very much helped Ajax in their historic Champions League campaign. As for the unforgettable George Weah, he went even further, and after his heroics at AS Monaco and PSG in 1995, has won the Ballon d'Or, representing AC Milan, the most prestigious club on the planet back at that era. In the meantime, the young and unconventional Nigerian national side took by the storm spectators at the 1994 World Cup, where they almost eliminated the eventual runners-up Italy in the round of 16. And 2 years later, the Super Eagles won the Olympic Games in Atlanta in a brilliant fashion, beating en route to the glory the mighty Brazil and Argentina. The future of African football looked bright and sunny at that point, and a lot of people even thought that the Nigerians are more than capable to win the World Cup in 1998. But as you know, after that, something went horribly wrong. So why the African football stopped moving forward and got stuck for decades instead? Here are the main reasons. The natural evolution of the game is the first of them. Football from day to day is getting faster and more athletic. During the last 20-25 years, European players have made significant headway in this direction, and the initial advantage of Africans in this regard now almost vanished. The today's footballers in general are taller, stronger, much more durable and agile than their predecessors, and amid this tendency, it's really hard to surprise somebody, especially as a unit, by the pluses that are so common to the players from the Black Continent. The fact that Africa still has a plenty of individual talent only vindicated, because the dream of winning the World Cup is almost gone now. In 2018, all 5 teams that represented the continent were unable to pass even the group stage, their worst result in more than 35 years. At the same time, Africa could have much more stars and depth if it wasn't a stern competition with Europe for the potentially best players. Marcel Desailly, Claude Makelele and Patrick Vieira all were born on the Black Continent, in Ghana, Zaire and Senegal respectively, and could represent the appropriate countries, but in their childhood immigrated to France and subsequently opted to play for Le Bleu. These are the clearest examples, but there are the other ones, less prominent. For instance, Zinedine Zidane and later Karim Benzema had a legitimate right to represent Algeria. Kylian Mbappé, if he desired, could well be a part of the Cameroonian national side, and Antonio Rüdiger had a genuine opportunity to play for Sierra Leone instead of Germany. But. In fact, all these footballers opted for the country in which they were born, like it did Paul Pogba, whose older brothers, Florian and Matthias, came into the world in Guinea. As you may see, the Black Continent lost and continued to lose a ton of talent to Europe, explicitly or implicitly. No less than 15 players that won the World Cup for France have direct African roots, and this is a huge number indeed. Weak coaches and inability to find better ones, this is the reason number 3. It's almost impossible to be a tactical guru or master of physical preparation living in Africa due to a specific environment and a relatively low level of football. On the other hand, it's tough to bring a really solid manager from Europe, given the financial demands of the specialists with a good, let alone brilliant, track record. On top of that, coaching job in a national team with the passage of time is becoming less and less attractive. Hence, the best in the business prefer to work at the club level. It's really interesting that all 3 men that have led the African teams to their best result at the World Cup, quarter-final stage to be exact, weren't great coaches in a common sense of this word. Валерий Непомнящий, before his arrival to Cameroon, was a stranger in a strange land even in his native USSR. Moreover, as he later candidly admitted himself, he was originally planning to train the youth national Cameroonian side and was endlessly surprised when much more prestigious job has been offered to him. The late Bruno Metsu, who set the world on fire coaching Senegal in 2002, had a reputation of journeyman in France and spent only one incomplete and pretty much uninspiring, to put it mildly, season in this capacity in the Ligue 1. As for Milovan Rajvac, his curriculum vitae wasn't any better before the famous run at the helm of Ghana national team in 2010. That demonstrates that in order to find a proper coach for this type of job, one must first and foremost have luck and premonition, and therefore mainly rely on intangible factors. Meanwhile, the role of manager and his ability to motivate and communicate with the people around are vital, because it's much harder to mold a cohesive unit in the case of African players with their extra sensitivity and fragile mentality. Build the team around a world-class player is also a tricky task, and the examples of Via, Samuel Eto'o, Didier Drogba and Mohamed Salah show it pretty well. None of them tasted a play of football at the World Cup. Okay, Via represented Liberia. Even Pelé, in his prime perhaps, won't be able to experience a major success leading such a modest squad. But Eto'o, Drogba and Salah could and probably should have achieved more in that chapter of their respective careers. All of them in their national teams were not only surrounded by the footballers of a lesser quality, in contrast to top clubs, but also sometimes were forced to play in a tactically outdated version of the game, which drastically diminished their best qualities. It's awfully difficult to get a good result at the World Cup for a side from the Black Continent, but it's even harder to retain it. Knowing it full well, Непомнящий, Metsu and Rajvac opted to leave their respective teams immediately after the end of the prolific World Cup and did it without any hesitation. The hallmark of African football is the effective absence of the elite tier of national teams. Unlike Europe, where Germany, Spain, France, and until recently Italy had a secure, almost guaranteed place at the World Cup, and in contrast to South America, where Brazil and Argentina historically are almost impregnable in these contexts, neither of African teams could be safe and dependably immune from failing to qualify. In addition to a highly competitive environment, there are some factors that are typical predominantly for the continent. Horrible pitches, organizational disorder, and incredibly hostile atmosphere in away games could transform even an easy match, on paper of course, into the worst nightmare, and that's why common logic here sometimes simply doesn't exist. For example, Egypt won 4 African Cups from 1998 to 2010, but at the same period of time, being the king of that competition, couldn't reach the World Cup final stage. We can also recall that in 2006, the rest of the world was shell-shocked when Africa was represented in Germany by 4 debutants of this tournament, while the eminent Nigeria, Cameroon, and Senegal were unable to qualify. So it's terribly tough to sustain a certain status and good level of stability, not the least because African national teams rarely get a chance to play with the best from other continents in the period of time that separates one World Cup from the following one. Vast distances, packed schedule, painstaking negotiations, and let's be fair, not very high prestige of the most squads, even the likes of Nigeria, Senegal, and Egypt are big and in many cases insurmountable obstacles. That's why national teams from the Black Continent mainly have to be aloof, and as we all perfectly know, this type of regime could do a lot of harm to anybody. For these very reasons, the African football long time ago stopped its progress, and it would be extremely difficult to reverse this trend. It doesn't mean that success of a particular team is impossible, even at the next World Cup, but in order to do it, any national side from the Black Continent should surprise their opponents as much as Cameroon did in 1990, Senegal 12 years later, and Ghana in 2010.